Speaking of people of Indian descent,
Oh man, that
we
segue
got
though. Here, you can stand on segue today.
huh? Oh, thank you. Sweet. This is
So
awesome. I can
It's
go.
got
I can
it's
go
got its own little
forward.
massage.
I can go backwards. Ah!
Okay,
Ah!
while he's screaming in pain
My
on the ground,
leg!
we're gonna have to look at this. This is a report from Forbes. Everything we know about the isolated Sentinelese people of the North Sentinel Island. This is written by Kiona N. Smith from Forbes.com. I'll put her name up on the screen.
She covers science and history of science, technology, and exploration.
Hey,
You're
alive.
Give me the chair.
That's a shame.
Give me the chair.
Here you go.
Okay.
Should have just put that death sound of Steve from Minecraft there when you fall down. The death of an American tourist who illegally visited the isolated North Sentinel. We were talking about this on the last podcast. Island had drawn the world's attention to the small island's reclusive inhabitants. They're one of the mostly uncontacted groups left in the world, and they owe that isolation partly to geography. North Sentinel is a small island off the main shipping routes surrounded by a shallow reef with no natural harbors, partly to protective laws enforced by the Indian government, and partly to their own fierce defense of their home and their privacy. But they're not entirely uncontacted. Over the last 200 years, outsiders have visited the island several times, and it often ended badly for both sides.
Who are the Sentinelese? Sentinelese? According to a 200... No, give me a beat. According to a 2011 census effort, and based on anthropologist estimates of how many people on the island could support, there are probably somewhere between 80 and 150 people on North Sentinel Island. Word up. Come on. Yeah. Although it could be as many as 500, or as few as 15. Yeah, 15. The Sentinelese people are related to other indigenous groups in the Andaman Islands, a chain of islands in India's Bay and Bengal. But they have been isolated for so long, enough that other Andaman groups, like the Ongj and the Jarara, can't understand their language. Come on. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Based on a single visit to Sentinelese village in 1967, we know that they live in lean-to huts with slanted roofs. Bandit described a group of huts built facing one another with a carefully tended fire outside each one. We know that they built small, narrow outrigger canoes, which they can maneuver with long poles in the relatively shallow, calm waters inside the reef. For those canoes, the Sentinelese fish and harvest crabs. They're hunter-gatherers. And if their lifestyle is anything like that related to the Adamese peoples, they probably live on the fruits and tubers that grow wild on the island, eggs from seagulls or turtles, and small game like pigs or birds. They carry bows and arrows as well as spears and knives, and unwelcome villagers have learned to respect their skill with all the above. Many of those tools and weapons are tipped with iron, which the Sentinelese probably find wash ashore and work to suit their needs.
The Sentinelese weave mesh baskets, and they use adze tipped with iron. Salvage crews anchored near the island in the mid-1990s described bonfires on the beach at night and the sounds of people singing. But so far, none of the Sentinelese language is known to outsiders. Anthropologists usually make a point to refer to people by the name they use for themselves, but no one outside North Sentinel Island actually knows what the Sentinelese call themselves, let alone how they greet them or ask what their view of the world and their role in it really looks like. Look at that picture.
So if you're born, I've seen some memes before about like difficulty being born in different like parts of the world.
Yeah.
Difficulty on this island would probably be like 10.
Well, not to them,
like being born in like America when that's like difficulty level 1.
To them, it's like a 5.
Yeah, maybe.
They're
I guess if you
wouldn't know.
Yeah, if you know what's, I guess their own part of life, they see it as easy.
I mean, they don't have to learn taxes or have to deal with like property values.
It's all bartering.
Exactly, and they're probably all in like one community.
Yeah.
So there's not even, they just like, okay.
They say we don't know much about them.
Come on, help hunt, and we'll all come back and we'll eat, and then you can sew me some pants if I wear pants if I feel like it.
Yeah, they obviously have their hunters. They
I'll go get some
obviously have their
crabs.
gatherers. They have their fishers.
Mm-hmm.
They have the medicine man.
Oh yeah. Let's see here. What we know for sure is that they don't care much for company, and they've expressed that clearly, even without a common language.
Very nice.
This is November 14, 2005 photo. Clouds hang over North Sentinel Island in India's, and I'm not clicking that. It's his island.
It almost looks like it was like deforested in one part of it.
Doesn't
that look like it?
That's beach. That's coastal beach.
Okay.
The tide comes in here, and then because this is lower,
right,
so the water would come in right around here.
I see. Okay. Why don't the Sentinelese like visitors? One night in 1771, an East Indian Company vessel sailed past Sentinel Island and saw lights gleaming on the shore. But the ship was on a hydrographic survey mission and had no reason to stop, so the Sentinelese remained undisturbed for nearly a century, until an Indian merchant ship called the Nineveh ran aground on the reef. 86 passengers and 20 crew managed to swim and splash their way to the beach. They huddled there for 3 days before the Sentinelese evidently decided the intruders had overstayed their welcome, a point they made with bows and iron-tipped arrows. Western history only records the Nineveh's side of the encounter, but it's interesting to speculate what might have happened if the Sentinelese village behind the scenes. Was there a debate on how to handle these newcomers? Did the shipwreck victims cross a boundary or violate a law unknown to them, prompting the Sentinelese to respond? Or did it just take them 3 days to decide what to do? The Nineveh's passengers and crew responded with sticks and stones, and two sides formed an uneasy detenite until a Royal Navy vessel arrived to rescue the shipwrecked survivors. While they were in the neighborhood, the British decided to declare Sentinel Island as part of Britain's colonial holdings, a decision which really mattered only to the British until 1880. That's when a young Royal Navy officer named Maurice Vidal Portman took charge of Anavan and Nicobar colony. Portman fancied himself an anthropologist, and in 1880 he landed on North Sentinel Island with a large party of naval officers and convicts with a Pinot colony on Great Edmund Island and enemies' tracks. They found only hastily abandoned villages. The people seem to have seen the intruders coming and fled to hiding places further inland. But one elderly couple and 4 children must have lagged behind. The Portman and his search party captured them and carried them off to Port Blair, the colonial capital on South Andaman Island. Soon, all 6 of the kidnapped Sentinelese became desperately sick, and the elderly couple died in Port Blair. Portman somehow decided it was a good idea to drop off the 4 sick children on the beach of North Sentinel along with a small pile of gifts. We have no way to know whether the children spread the illness to the rest of their people or what the impact might have been. But the experience definitely didn't leave the Sentinelese with warm, fuzzy feelings toward the foreign visitors. In 1896, an escaped convict tried to flee the Great Andaman Island penal colony on a makeshift raft, and an excellent illustration of concept of out of the frying pan into the fire. He washed ashore on North Sentinel Island. The colonial search party found his remains a few days later, full of arrow wounds, with his throat cut. The British wisely decided to leave the Sentinelese in peace, at least for the next century or so. Wow.
Is it possible to make friends? Bum, 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 bum. 100 years after the wreck of the Nineveh, a team of anthropologists led by Trinok Nath Pandit, working under the auspices of the Indian government, landed on North Sentinel Island. Paint the picture in your mind. Like Portman, they found only hastily abandoned huts. The people had fled so quickly that they left the fire still lit outside their homes. Pandit and his team left gifts, bolts of cloth, candy, and plastic buckets. But naval officers and Indian police accompanying Pandit also stole from the Sentinelese, taking bows, arrows, baskets, and other items from their unguarded homes, despite the anthropologists' protests. still not a great showing of the outside world. Meanwhile, North Sentinel Island had been in a state of limbo, legal limbo, since India gained its independence in 1947. In 1970, India claimed the isolated little island, and a survey dropped a stone tablet on the beach to say so. There is no record of the Sentinelese response. Pandit and his colleagues kept trying to make contact, mostly by pulling a dinghy onto the beach, dropping off coconuts and other gifts. Coconuts. And beating a hasty retreat. The Sentinelese didn't care much for live pigs, which they speared and then buried in the sand with poor plastic toys, which got the same treatment. But they seemed pleased with metal pots and pans, and they quickly grew very fond of coconuts, which don't grow on the island. Pandit and his colleagues delivered them by the bagful, usually with bows and arrows trained on them until they departed. 25 years passed that way, with no direct contact. But Pandit thought the visitors were building up some trust. The visits were sporadic, until 1981. A National Geographic film crew tagged along in 1974. Wait, what? The visitors were sporadic until 1981. And then it goes back in 1974. Okay. And the director caught an arrow in the thigh for his trouble. The exiled king, Leopold III of Belgium, passed close to the island on a boat tour in 1975, and the Sentinelese warned him off with arrows. For some reason, the king was absolutely delighted by the whole thing.
They're shooting arrows.
Hilarious! In 1981, a cargo ship called the Primrose and her crew of 28 ran aground on the reef in an eerie echo of the Nineveh. But this time, the sailors were rescued by helicopter. 1981, yeah, I guess, yeah, helicopters there. And later, visitors to the island say that the Sentinelese seem to have salvaged metal from the ship for their tools and weapons, for artisans used to working with scraps of metal that washed ashore. The whole ship must have been an incredible find. That same year, Pandit and his team stepped up their efforts, dropping by the island every month or two. And a decade later, a year before Pandit's retirement, that regularity and persistence paid off. One day, in early 1991, a group of islanders came to the beach to collect their gifts with no weapons, just woven baskets and adzes they used to cut open coconuts, although later encounters proved how well those adzes would be used in self-defense. Foreboding, they ventured closer to the outsiders than ever before. Later that day, when anthropologists returned, they found 24 Sentinelese people standing on the beach, and an interesting scene played out. A man raised his bow to aim at the visitors, and a woman pushed the bow down. The man responded by dropping the bow and arrow and burying them in the sand. It's still not clear whether this was a negotiation in progress or a ritual display, but as soon as the weapons were disposed of, the people rushed out to the visitors' boats to collect their coconuts. But Sentinelese hospitality had its limits. On another visit, a few weeks later, a Sentinelese man signaled to Pandit that it was time for the guests to leave by drawing his knife and making a cutting gesture. If we tried to venture into the territory without respecting their wishes or got too close for comfort, they would turn their backs on us and sit down on their haunches, as if to defecate. That was meant to be an insult. If we didn't pay heed and stop, they would shoot arrows as a last resort, Pandit told the Indian Express. Now you get to be that.
Okay.
I'm not done! I'm not having my time in the spotlight! How dare you! Ah! He stabbed
Thank
me.
you very much.
He stabbed me, but I'll continue on because I'm a
I need
professional.
that knife back.
Ah!
It's
There
my
you go.
knife.
You
Can't
might
have it.
You might want to clean it. I have lots of diseases.
I'll save that for later.
Okay. The
vampire
tenuous
friends.
friendship between the islanders and the anthropologist never moved beyond coconut handouts. The Sentinelese never offered gifts in return and never invited the visitors to stay or venture inland. And neither side ever learned how to actually speak with the other. And the Sentinelese didn't always welcome the visitors. Sometimes the anthropologists were still greeted by armed men on the beach. The Indian government suspended the anthropologist's visits until 1996.
I think they suspended it in 1996, so they couldn't visit anymore.
Yes. When the Indian Coast Guard helicopters flew over the island after the 2004 tsunami, they found the Sentinelese in good shape and not at all pleased to see them, and not at all hesitant to attack the helicopter with bows and arrows. A couple years later, in 2006, an Indian crab harvesting boat drifted ashore, and the Sentinelese killed both fishermen and buried their remains.
Wow. What happens now?
What happens now?
What happened? Given that history, it's not remotely surprising that the Sentinelese people saw American tourist John Ellen Cho as trespasser when he stepped onto their island earlier this month and stood on the beach singing hymns. They chased him away twice, but when he ventured ashore a third time, they're believed to have killed him. Now it appears they've buried his remains, as they did with the two Indian fishermen in 2006. The Indian government has now called off the search for Chow's body, citing danger to both search personnel and the Sentinelese people. The incident has sparked a discussion about protections for relatively uncontacted groups like the Sentinelese. Pandit was advocating leaving them be. According to the now retired anthropologist, the Sentinelese have made it clear that they don't want contact and are doing just fine on their own. Indian officials continue to visit the island for periodic census. The last one was in 2011.
2011.
So this was talking about the guy who visited. When was this written? Okay, this was written
2018.
November 3rd, 2018. So it was that Christian guy who visited. He was trying to bring the Bible. And they ran him off twice, but he kept coming back. And the third time was like, all right, you did.
What a shame. What a shame.
I mean, even if they let him stay there, they don't know how to speak, like, English. Or, like, whatever other language. They never bothered to learn a language.
They don't care.
If only he looked up the history, he would have known this before going.
They have very little care for anyone else.
If all else failed, like if the first time they chase you off with like arrows and whatnot, you're like, you know what? I'll just leave the Bible book here. And if they want, they can try to read it.
If they want, they can read it. I know they read English or Indian or American or whatever that he was.
Leave two books, like one book that has like how to read English for like grade schoolers, where it has like a picture of an apple.
Oh,
and
like yeah, okay.
And then you like, you know.
Well, like they don't even know what all that stuff is.
They don't even know how to read. Yes.
What
I don't
is
know.
This? Apple? Cat? You don't have.
But they would have their. I guess they would have their own words for it. So I don't even know how you would do it.
There's probably.
If you get chased
animals.
off twice with people with bows and arrows, you'd be like, you know what? It's not worth it.
You know, because there's no one's been there. There's probably like some unique animals on that island. That'd be pretty interesting.
Maybe. Maybe.
Yeah.
You know, like they're protected for now. You know, you never know how the government will be in the next 100 years.
What a world! What an undiscovered world that would be interesting to see.
I don't know, that was really cool.
From a distance.
And yeah, I really enjoyed that. So, what did you think there, Goose? Do you think that they'll be okay for the next 100 years? I think.
Yeah.
You know, I think after society falls apart, they'll probably still be fine. They won't even know that the society fell apart.
All they need is
they'll be the ones rebuilding society.
one sickness. They just see one sickness and then they'll all be wiped out.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's one of the reasons why they also don't want people visiting, because you know you go there with a cough or whatever or something on your clothes, and then all of a sudden they're all affected.
You think it's just like a communication thing, or I think it's like a religious thing? They don't like people.
It's probably whatever their beliefs are. Yeah, they're just like so set in their ways. They probably have some kind of like chief kind of thing. Like there's like one guy. Maybe there's either one guy or a group of elders that lead them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And maybe later on, once those elders pass on, maybe the newer people might be more willing to accept it. I'm guessing if they had kept up the delivering of coconuts, and after those elders passed on, maybe the newer people or the newer leaders would be more willing to communicate. But since they cut it off, it's probably going to be a little bit harder to communicate with them.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're so used to not having anybody there for the past 20 years or so.
Right, but they're doing it for a few years. I think they would just be comfortable, like, yeah, they bring coconuts and that's it. We don't have to give any back.
Yeah, they literally had to give nothing in exchange.
It's really just like you need us, but we don't need you kind of thing.
Yeah, but it's too bad they never like kind of tried to show them how to plant it though. They probably could have like shown them how to plant the coconuts to grow palm trees. I'm not sure exactly where it's located geographically, so I don't know if it would have grown on the island or not, but I'm going to guess it probably could have.
I bet they got rats now. I bet one of the boats brought rats over.
Yeah, maybe.
That's usually how.
Well, they probably weren't too fond of the people who were kidnapped.
In New Zealand,
those kids are probably still alive. The ones who were like kidnapped and brought back.
Maybe. Well, by now they're probably dead. But
well, yeah, they might. Yeah. Their kids, they would have told their kids about it.
In New Zealand, no animals really existed. They only had like birds and some insects, and then one day they brought over like livestock. And that brought over like rats and everything.
Wow.
But they used to just be birds because like no animals could actually reach the island.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
There's also like that island that's like full of cats.
I didn't hear that. That sounds interesting.
Yeah. It'd probably be interesting to have like 100 cats running at you.
Maybe that might be interesting to look up next time on the Folklore Scrolls.
Oh yeah, we'll look at the island of cats.
Cat Island.
Sounds like a plan.
My favorite. Right next to Dog Island, the movie.
LOL.
Now available on Blu-ray at your local Walmart.
Oh boy. Holla at you later.
Bye.